Hello, everybody. My name is Brian O'Haron. The name of this particular program is Planning for Success, and I hope over the next weeks to talk a bit about how to run the town like a business and using the town as an example of the business, and try to point out some ways that we can improve on this. They're my ideas or my views. I've done this for a living, and I can help a lot. As I said in previous programs, if people don't listen or don't want to listen or don't want to do anything, that's their prerogative. This is just kind of like a course. Sometimes it takes you 20 years to realize you learned something from a certain person 20 years ago. And a lot of people, when I was out running big programs and companies, used to say to me, Brian, this is terrible. We don't like being here. And I said, oh, well, maybe in 25 years you'll write me a letter and invite me to the reunion. And guess what? I get invited to a lot of reunions, and when I go to reunions, they always say, boy, that was a wonderful time we had back there. Didn't look so great at the time, but we were successful. We contributed a lot to society and to the community, and we're very, very happy. Okay, so tonight you'll see with me, I said I wasn't going to have any guests on this program, but tonight I have a very, very famous guest. His name is William H. Batchelor, and he's here for a specific reason, which I'll discuss during the show. He's been dead now about 100 years. He died at the age of 70. I'm 70, so I'm a little queasy about that. But anyway, he was a wonderful man for the town of Winsted in the area of Winchester, and I want to talk a bit about him if we get time towards the end of the program. I cut out the music tonight because we got a jam-packed program. I'm going to go pretty speedily through it all, and then if anybody wants to go into more detail, they can either contact me by mail or by email. And I'll be happy to either meet with them or do whatever we can to help. Now, I'd like to thank everybody for the feedback I got in the last week. It's been unbelievable. Some think people pointed out mistakes in my slides, mistakes in my presentation. I'll fix those as we go along tonight. My view is to get information out to as many people as possible. Sometimes it won't be totally right because I have to get it out from people who are very busy and don't have a lot of time to spend with me, and it isn't always written down in an easy way. So there will be some glitches from time to time. I guarantee you, though, that we're interested in the facts, and when people point out problems or errors, we'll fix them. And that's what I'm going to do tonight. Okay, I want to say that this, I hope, is going to be a positive show, and we're not going to be talking about people or naming names or pointing the finger at anybody. We're just going to try to talk about philosophy and an approach and a way of doing things in a positive manner. And I want you to know that I'm a very positive person, have been all my life, and I always look at things as though the glass is half full, not half empty. So all tonight I'm going to be looking at things, and throughout the programs, the glass is half full, and there is a future for Winsted. It's a good future, it's a bright future, and if you don't have that thought process, it'll never be bright. So you have to have a positive attitude, and you have to approach things in a positive manner. Tonight we're going to do Chapter 2, and if we can cut to this slide I have here, I'd said at the end of the last week's show, I would identify the problem, which I think I did last week, and we'll talk a bit about that. But basically the problem is, for the last 10 years, we've been breaking even as a town. We haven't made money. We haven't lost money. We've been breaking even. We might have lost money if you consider that we have a lot of problems that have been around for 20 or 30 years that we haven't fixed, like the maintenance problems we've been discussing with the bond issue. Now, this program isn't about the bond issue. Matter of fact, I'll be glad when we're past that and we can talk more about how to run a business. But today I'm going to go into this number 2 on here, which is to give you a proposed required solution. So how we can get the town to be profitable. And when I say profitable, I don't mean a profit like in a normal company. This is a nonprofit company, but money that we can take and put aside. As I said in my green papers a year and a half ago, which you can get a copy of down at the town clerk's office, put aside for a rainy day, like when we need a new fire truck, a new police car, a new, not police car, because Henry told me that's probably not a good thing to have a fund for, but a new building for the firemen, new building for the policemen, a new school building, fix up the buildings along Main Street. One of these shows, I'll get into those when we go into management by objectives, because that's what the green paper is. That's management by objectives that I jumped into, and without explaining the concept to everybody, because we didn't have time then. But I'm going to do that now. So this is what I call Chapter 2. Now, you can change these slides. I'm going to put up now the agenda. The agenda for today, I always like to put the agenda up in case anybody wants to leave early or they want to stay later and see what's on, something later on the agenda. You can always get a copy of the tape from me. You can't get it down here, but you can come down and watch it, I guess, or you can, if you want to watch it, you can get it from me. But the agenda for today is just an update on the probable 41.2 million bond issue and what the probable tax repercussions might be. Now, that I'm going to try to get into less each week. I think this is the last week I'm going to talk about it in any kind of detail. Next week I'll just say, well, here's where we stand. Unless some big things happen during the week, then we'll have to discuss it. We do talk about this on other shows that I attend, but none of them we don't go into detail because they have other issues to talk about, and I'm usually get about 5 or 10 minutes, and that's about it. That's why I set up this program, so I could spend an hour going into more detail than we do on the other programs. The next thing I'm going to talk about is what I think the solution should be from my experience in the past. Not everybody will agree with it, but we'll go through it logically and mathematically. And it's not a political problem here. This is a finance problem, a business problem, and we'll take you through that. And then I'm going to talk about sinking funds in the town of Winchester. And they've been around for a long, long time, and that's one of the reasons why my friend Mr. William H. Batchelor is here today, because he set up a sinking fund in 1906 for the town of Winchester, which still exists to this day. It's called the Winchester Sinking Fund. We'll talk a bit about, if we get enough time, we'll talk about that at the end of the program. And then I'll just give you a brief idea of what we're going to be talking about next week. The first thing I want to go over is an update. I just turned to stand. I hope that doesn't goof things up. It's a little tricky for me, but okay. The first thing we want to talk about is the percentage. Last week I had 18% up, and I said I would go away and look more at the reval side of things. I got some nice calls and emails from people that said, Brian, it's a little confusing. It's a little hard to read this, so I broke it up, and I'm giving a different presentation, which I'll explain now as rapidly as I can. I put down 14% before revaluation. That are the numbers which I'll show you on the next slide. And they were on there last time, but I have changed those a bit in that I raised the proposed bond from 2.2 mils to 2.67. And the reason I did that was because in the bond package, they had two different sets of numbers. They had one that came out to 2.67 and one that came out to something like 2.9 something if it was a normal bond release. But I'm taking them at their word that they have a secret way of doing this bond package that is in all the documentation that gets us a lower interest rate and a lower amount to pay back each year. So I put in the lower amount here. If it turns out not to be that, it's higher, or we'll change it as soon as we get the official information from the people. Then what I did for after revaluation, I gave up trying to explain it. I got a couple things I want to say about that, because it's almost impossible to explain how the reval is going to affect everybody in the following year. So what I did here is I just say after reval, it's going to be the 14% that I have here, and that's, and that's plus or minus a little bit. We don't know the exact numbers there; they're estimates. And then we're going to say plus what I call the reval component, and that is the percent changed caused by revaluation and associated mill rate change. I'm going to talk about that in a minute. So the RE is a revaluation effect. Nobody can tell you what that is. Henry Centrella can't tell you what it is. Nobody can until we get a certain set of information. So I'm going to leave that more or less to figure out at a later time. We're going to be now putting up this slide, which is the breakdown, same as it was the last two programs. I did change the proposed bond from 2 to 2.67. Now you can see before reval, it's still 14%. The 2006 bond is about 1 mil, which is 3%. That's going to happen for sure. The expense, unless somebody's got some trick up their sleeve that we don't know about, the expense budget will probably be at least 1 mil, maybe it could be less, a little more. That's about 3%. And then the proposed bond, 2.67 is what's in the bond package. I use the most optimistic number there, not the most pessimistic number. And so that's about 8%. So we've got 14%. After revaluation, we will then be able to tell how much it affects our total taxes for next year. Now I'm going to explain the revaluation effect that I mentioned on the slide, just so you can see. The revaluation effect is a formula for calculating property taxes. The formula is written here. It's appraised value times 70%, which is 0.70, equals assessed value, and the assessed value times the mill rate equals the new tax amount. And when I say the mill rate, that's the new mill rate for next year, 2008, 2009, and the new assessed values after the reval for each of the properties in town. So it's really hard until after reval to know what those numbers are. Matter of fact, it's impossible. So I did an example here, which I won't go into now, for a house that's today worth $100,000 and the appraised value next year going up to $150,000. I just did a little example so people could get an idea of how it's calculated. If anybody wants a copy of this example, rather than go through it here, send me a note. I'll send you a copy of it. I'll come talk to you, take you through it. I've already done it with a lot of people because I can tell you I get stopped a lot on the street. The next point I want to make, and I'm putting up another slide, I have to give the cue to the slide man, and that is, this is the status for this 41.9 bond package status. It's presently with the bond counsel and other outside consultants for review. They reviewed it with the state, I guess. I saw some articles about it. They're reviewing it with the bond counsel and Mr. Dix and people like that, and I don't know who, but they're all going to give their input. And then once that's done, then it will go to the Board of Selectmen for review and approval. At a special meeting, if desired, I'm told they can do a special meeting, or at one of the regular board meetings. And the regular board meetings are October 1st, October 15th, and November 5th. Once approved by the Board of Selectmen, an advertisement must be placed in the newspaper. It usually goes in almost the last page of the Waterbury Republican somewhere, the legal notices, which most people don't even look at. But anyway, it goes in there, and there will be articles in the paper. This is a very well looked at thing. So there'll be articles in the paper, there'll be announcements, and I'll be telling you each week here where we stand. So then it will go to the public meeting. It has to be announced for a public meeting, and the public meeting has to happen within 30 days or less. Now, the less could be anything. Nobody could tell me what the legal thing is. So somewhere, it can't be later than 30 days, but it could be less. So that means, hey, maybe there is a chance to get it in before the election. I don't know. I can't figure this math out here. But at the public meeting, it can be sent to a town referendum. I say can, but it can be sent to a town referendum within not less than 21 days after the public meeting, or more than 45 days, where it will be voted on by the taxpayers. I'm told this information from Town Hall, and it's the best information I have available to me. If it's not right, and somebody can tell me better numbers and better dates, I'll put it up and let you know. Otherwise, that's kind of what I have to work with. The next thing I want to point out is that because it's so difficult to calculate the mill rate for the following year, I'm going to put up what I call my impossible slide. I got a new slide up here. The impossible slide says it's impossible now to calculate the mill rate for 08 and 09 after revaluation. And what you need to do to calculate the mill rate is you need the net amount to be raised by taxes in 08 and 09. You have to know that. This year, it was $20 million in a change. And that's how we calculated the mill rate. We took the $20 million and we divided it by the net grand list, 588,080,000, roughly in that neighborhood. And we got the new mill rate, which was 34.26. So that's what our mill rate is. So we need to know the net amount to be raised by taxes. We won't know that till the budget's approved by referendum next year. We'll have a pretty good idea when it's up near the referendum. Until it's approved, might take 7, might take 1 referendums. The next is you have to know the net grand list for next year. You have to know how much the revaluation's done, how much is all the total of all the assessed property in town, so we can use that. And then you have to, the reason you need the net grand list is because you got to divide it into the net amount to be raised by taxes. And then you also need the budget figures, because even though technically when you do a reval, the valuation of property goes up or down. I mean, it's been going up in the last 10 years, and it'll probably go up this time quite a bit because values of houses have increased for one reason or another over the last 5 years. So we're expecting it to go up. But then what they do in the city hall is, or town hall, is they drop the mill rate accordingly. So theoretically, and I've got some nice feedback on this from people, and I talked to Mr. Centrell about it, theoretically, for the average taxpayer, it's a 0, okay? But if the budget goes up, then the taxes will go up for that. Now, we've already said probably the budget might go up 14%. Well, it could go up 16% or 18%, or it could go up 12% or 10%. We'll know that better when we see all the information in the figures. So what I'm saying, and I'm just looking from a financial viewpoint here now, people want to understand that. If they want to call me not so smart, then they have to do it with this information. Again, I didn't look at the size of the buildings or the place of the buildings or anything like that. I'm just looking at the financial plan, and you'll see that come out over the weeks as we talk about these following steps. But what I would say as a financial guy, and a guy who owns a house and pays a lot of taxes, I said because it's an expensive year for financial reasons alone in 2008-09, and that we should probably delay this referendum on the bond issue until the taxpayers know all the tax implications for 2008 and 2009. That's what I would recommend if I were looking at it from a financial viewpoint, because then everybody would know exactly what the impact's going to be, and they could plan for it, and they could say, yeah, we can afford that, or they could say, gee, we can't afford that, and it would be more sensible to take that approach. Now, I don't think that's going to happen. I think they're going to probably rush this bond issue through, and they're going to try to get it done for a lot of good reason. They want to get it done. But I'm saying if they do that, then you have to consider as taxpayers, if you can afford the 14% or whatever it turns out to be after reval, then that's okay, not a problem. If you're concerned about it, then you probably ought to consider voting against the bond issue and asking them to come up with another bond issue as fast as they can that you can get the information on, so you know where you stand. It's very difficult to vote yes on something where you don't know what the impact's going to be to you and your family and the future of your family. So I'm not giving anybody any advice here. You make up your own mind, and you know your pocketbook. I don't know it, but I feel it's my obligation as a finance type program here to make that point for everybody. Okay, now that's all I'm going to talk about the bond issue tonight. I hope next week to do less, unless there's a lot of events that happen, like the bond issue results get made public, or it gets rushed to referendum or something like that, then we'll talk about it. But otherwise, I want to talk more about planning for success on this program, not about this particular program. This bond issue just brought things to a head for me, so I said I better get in here and look at it. So now I just want to put this slide up, which says the problem we talked about last week. And bottom line on the problem we talked about last week is we've been breaking even. We showed it. Somebody wants to see the tape, they're welcome to look at it. I had one mistake in there, and I'm going to correct it right now. I got feedback from several people. I had misread 1.63 as mils instead of percent, and other people tell me they've done the same in the past when going from mils to percents and all. So I had 1.63 mils as the average increase for the budget over the years, and in actual fact, it's 1.63% on an average for 10 years, not 1.63 mils. So it's lower than I thought it would be, which gives us a little more latitude, or maybe in raising taxes, maybe not. We'll go into that in a few more minutes. But what I want to say about that is this whole thing about raising taxes is a little tricky, because what happens here is it's over all the year. Let's say we have 10 years of only with one a revaluation. In the future, there's going to be a revaluation every 5 years. This is the first 5-year revaluation. The last one was a 10-year revaluation. So that happened in the middle of these 10 years. Now, what I want to say to you is that in normal years, the budget goes up on average, if you take out the reval year, about 3%. Then when a revaluation comes and drops the mill rate, it averages out the whole year to 1.63%. Now, I might say that the reval may not go up some year. It may go down. I mean, if there's a depression or if all the values of the houses fall down because so many go on the market that it depresses the values of the houses, which is quite possible, then you won't have that, revaluation. Revaluation is basically to bring things it considers inflation. Over the last 10 years, property values go up so much, we'll do a revaluation, and that is basically for inflation. That's basically what it is, to factor that into our own figures here. So you'll find that the thing goes along, and then when there's a reval, it jumps way up. And that's what happens there. So anyway, the bottom line is, what you can talk about is, we're basically breaking even as a town. We get $1 in every year. We spend $1 every year. 0 goes into savings accounts. Some goes into the fund balance. But we got to be careful about the fund balance because that's needed for emergencies, and that's needed very badly if we have a disaster, if we have another flood or the town burns down, and that's not likely. Don't get scared. It's not likely, but that's what everybody's been telling us, why we need the fund balance. The other reason we need the fund balance is because we need to keep our credit high. We need to get low interest rates, so when we do borrow, preferably not big bond issues, but small bond issues, we get a very favorable interest rate. A couple of years ago, our bond rating from Moody's went down, and we're now paying a higher interest than we did a few years ago because our fund balance went down somewhere in the area of 400,000. Don't quote me on that because I don't know. Everybody argues about the numbers and they change every day, but somewhere down there when it should have been up around 1.5 million or so. And Henry Cincella can tell you better than I can, and maybe some of the selectmen can tell you. But as you know, they've been talking about the fund balance all year and arguing and everything. Okay, so I'm not going to say. So the next slide thing I want to put up here is, guess what? The town charter. That's in always questioned too, the town charter. But when you look at the town charter, it says, hey, we're incorporated in 1771. Incorporated. We're a corporation. We're a company. Now, we're a small company. We're a $30 million company. 20 million of it, as I said earlier, comes from us, the taxpayers. 10 million or so comes from the state, as I said last week. So we're a small company, incorporated. If you read the history books, which I did, and I gave a copy to the selectmen of both history books, thanks to Tony Canavo, who had them all reprinted again. I gave a copy to the Board of Education, and I gave copies out everywhere. So, and you can go read one if you want, and if you can't get one there, I'll lend you mine. But it takes you, the first one, called the Annals of Winchester, or whatever it is, there, that tells you where all the corporations were set up. And they were basically set up so they could collect taxes to fund the churches that were set up in the early days. There was only one in the beginning, and then they started not getting along with each other, so they split and formed 2, and then they split and formed 3, and now you got a whole bunch of churches, but they all came from basically the same background, and they taxed people so they could pay for the church and pay for the minister or deacon or whatever they were in the churches, and they actually gave them a couple pigs a year and a bunch of wood and some money, and gave them housing, and they got that from the people in the form of one or another of taxes. So that's what I want to point about that right now, and that we are a corporation. Now, when you talk to people, and I'm sure you will, they'll say, we're not a corporation, we're a town, we're not a corporation. You don't understand, Brian. We have problems that corporations don't have. Well, I'll guarantee you, we don't have any problems that corporations don't have. We have similar problems to corporations, but what I do on that is I apply the 95% rule, and I wrote a paper on the 95% rule for the Highland Lake dock and mooring stuff, and I pointed out that 95% of the time in business, you delegate to people and they can get on with their job 95% of the time. And they can go and, for example, our inland wetland man, he should be able to make decisions based upon a set of rules 95% of the time. 5% he might have to go back and ask the board for help. if you don't have that kind of an operation, you can't run a town efficiently. It's going to take forever. So that's the kind of thing I'm talking about. So 95% of the time, we can set up a system that 95% of the time, the people in the town can get on with their work and they can make decisions and they don't have to keep running for, we do kind of micromanage now. The selectmen are involved in everything, every decision. The taxpayers involved in everything. That's what the referendums are about. They're not everything, but they have to approve all monetary things over, I think, what's $15,000 or something like that. So, so what I'm saying here is, you show me, give me any example, send it by email, send it by mail, and I'll show you how a company has to deal with a very similar and same type of problem. And they have every problem you can imagine, right? And you have a lot less problems because you're only $30 million size company. And personally, to be honest with you, I haven't worked in too many that small. I have worked in some startups, and they were pretty small, but this is something we should be able to get our hands around pretty simply. But the same principles apply to a $30 million company or a $10 million company or a $500 million company, and that's what I'm going to try to show in the next few weeks in the simplest possible way that I can, so that you don't have to be a business major or a graduate of Harvard to understand it. So now I'm going to talk about what I consider to be the solution to the problem. And again, some people won't agree with me, and they all have their own, and that's okay too. That's what America's all about. We should be able to get together, however, and discuss these things without slamming and slandering and all that. And I'm trying to avoid all that here. So what I want to point out now is opportunity knocks, okay? And I'm going to show you in a minute opportunity knocking. Investors like bargains. So there's a cycle in economics and in businesses where if you have inexpensive land and beautiful surroundings, and for one reason or another it's cheaper to live here and invest here and have businesses here than it is anywhere else, people are going to come here. You're going to get people coming here to build developments, to build stores, to build factories. There's more complex when you get into factories because you need certain types of skills and things too, as we had in the old days. And you look in the history books, in the old days, we had skills here. We had the best machinists in the United States and in companies around here. We had, a lot of the best tanners. People came here to tan because there was a certain property in the bark of the trees that was used in the tanning process. So experts came here and they trained other experts. They came here because a lot of the natural resources were good for building the knives and the size. My grandfather, great-grandfather, he worked in a knife factory. This guy, Mr. Batchelor, he had the sci factory, him and his brothers. So this was great. So all our property values eventually are enticing by comparison to the surrounding areas. You know that. You go out around in these other places and it's more expensive than perhaps Winston is. People look at that, and it also has proximity to other things. It has proximity to New York, it has proximity to Boston, it has proximity to Hartford and all the other places around here, and that's very, very enticing to people. It has proximity to the ski area and all that. So I could sit here all day and talk to you about the advantages of this town, because I'm a positive system thinker, and I look at the good of all this stuff, but I can't help but saying it would be even better if we could address the problem. So let me just say one thing about positive thinking. Pointing out problems is positive thinking. It's not negative thinking. It's positive thinking because every problem solver wants to know what the problem is so he can try to solve it in a positive way. So you can't ignore these problems. You have to address them. And people say, "Well, you're being negative when you look at things." Well, I'm not being negative. I'm trying to say, hey, let's find out what the problems are. I'm going to give you a quick example of my wife and I walking around the lake. I got the nicest wife you ever want to have, very sweet and nice. And when I walk around the lake with her, she says, "Brian, look at that. Somebody threw some trash on this road. Isn't that awful?" And then she'll say, "Look at that. There's a nice bird over there. Let's look at that. Oh, look at the trees. The colors are so beautiful." And I say, "Watch out. You're stepping into a hole here. What car coming? Be careful. Don't get hit by the car." So I'm always looking to say, how can I make sure, that I look for the things to be careful so that we don't have that. So between us, we're a team. She points out all that stuff to me, and I point out all the other things to her, and together we get around the lake and get home. So I'm going to say to you that something good can be handled here properly. So we never give up. We can never give up. There are people in town telling me, Brian, this is a dead town. It's never going to make it again. Can't be done. Our days in the past. I don't believe any of that, okay? Well, all I say is let's look at it, and I'll show you in a minute, and let's see what we can do. And I've been all over town talking to everybody about this, and they're getting to the point where people say to me, why are you always downtown? Why are you always in the city hall? Because they suspect that maybe I'm in there doing something I shouldn't be doing and finding out something I shouldn't be knowing. But if you don't get in and find out all these things, how can you in any way help? You can't do it. So let's keep up the good work done over the last 10 years, and let's continue to make success happen. I believe that the following is essential for prosperity. Now, I'm going to just show one thing that I was lucky enough to see this weekend, and that is, this is the Republican, Sunday Republican. It's got a great article in it, which is Winston adds some polish. And if you look at the back page, it's a whole page on the positive things of Winston. Right? It's all positive. Now, there are a few things in there where it could be improved. There's a few things there. For example, they say the Gilson Theater is there, the Kelly's Kitchen, Health Food Corner, Christine's Flower Shop, Monaco's Restaurant, Mario's. This is all good stuff. And then we're completing projects, Phase 1 of Main Street, Enterprise Corridor, New Arts and Science Building, which is beautiful down the library. I spent a lot of time down in the library. Expanded space in development. Greenway, Aurora Estates, Winstead Furniture Company, American Mural Project with Paul Newman and Mario Andretti and other people like that. American Museum of Tort Law, which is, a person I think is a little underappreciated here, Ralph Nader. I shouldn't have said that because everybody will get mad at me and all, but he's done a lot of good for people in the world, and he's trying to do some good in Winsted, and my view is, hey, let's look at the good people are trying to do, and let's try to help them do better, right? And today I opened up the Republican. I don't have a copy with me, and there was another little article in there about 4 of the women in town who've done a wonderful job. I can name them. Barbara DeBellis, who's done a wonderful job. It's in the Republican today. Somebody wrote an article about it. I'm very impressed with Barbara. I've had a lot of good dealings with her, and she's very positive. And then Charlene Lavoie, I've also talked to her. I'm happy. She's in there, charging in there, trying to raise money to get this tort museum going, and she's out there working hard, very positive. Penny Owen, who I don't know, but she's doing a lot of good work, I guess, with the parks and having concerts and doing picnics and whatever she's involved in. I don't mean to slight her, but I'm not that involved in that. And then, of course, the Mayor Welcome, who's done a lot of good there. But one of the things I want to point out about the article, we put it down now, but that good has been done over the last 10 years, not over the last 2 years or the last 4 years. That's a lot of people working hard. Things are beginning to come together. I think what I'm going to talk to you tonight will help even more. Let's keep it up and let's be positive. And the more positive articles we see in these papers, the better up, because that gives an image all over the state and everywhere, and that helps. Now, I did ask 1 or 2 people that were involved in the planning area, and I said, what is the thing people want to see when they come here? They said, good grades in the schools is one of the most important things. Good grades in the schools. So I think that's a very high priority. I want you to know. The other thing I want you to know, I gave this talk about the bond issue, there are some amount of that work in the schools that absolutely needs to be done, and it needs to be done quickly, and you probably got to raise a bond for that because you don't have any other money anywhere, all right? So now what I'm going to talk about is options to begin to be able to save money. So what are these? Well, first of all, and this is, again, Brian's advice, I'm not going to talk too much about it, borrow for absolute emergencies only, like you would in your family. Borrow for only that which is absolutely necessary. Boil it down, borrow for that, because you have to pay interest on it, and it's going to come out. I think I calculated that if we do the total bond, it's going to be about 12% a year we carry for 20 years. Of course, it goes down because of inflation, and it goes down because we're paying some of it back. But, it's a big number to be carrying for the next 5 or 6 years if it turns out to be anywhere near like we're planning it. So what I'm saying is, hey, got to look at that very closely, boil it down to what we absolutely need while we go with the next 4 steps I'm going to mention. The next step is, this is controversial, but because we're breaking even and we want to try to get ahead and we don't have any miracle happening right now, we may need to decrease spending or change our priorities. For example, if you want to sell the town, you need a salesman. You need to pay a salesman, I mean, on your staff or a consultant or whatever, but you've got to get into that mode. So we'll talk a lot about that on the show over the next few weeks, not tonight. The next thing is increase the average yearly taxes increases a bit from 1.63 to X to Y. I don't make those decisions, but there may be some room there and there may not be. If the taxpayers agree to do that, you can. But I can tell you, these first 3 steps are the toughest steps. They're like when you start working, when you get out of school and you haven't got a nickel and your folks say, you know, like my folks said, Dad, I said, can I borrow $1? Can I have $1? He said, go get a job. You know, so how do I get ahead? Well, you get a job and you improve your skills. And when you're a master whatever, you'll make more money and you'll be able to afford more things. Meanwhile, now I'll tell you, when I went through Kansas and I worked my way through, you could in those days, it's tougher today to do that. I had one coat the whole time. You know, I was ashamed to go to people's houses for dinner and for Christmas and for Thanksgiving because I didn't have any clothes, right? But I got through school and I got my degree and I got into the computer industry and I worked hard and did what I had to do. So we as a town have to do a similar thing now. We don't have, and if we go borrow and we get ourselves $5 or $10 million in interest to pay, that's going to put us deeper in the hole. Now we will get some work done, don't get me wrong, but it's work that's more catch-up work than it is how can we get ahead work, which I'm going to talk about in a minute. So, and the next thing is expedite the increase. Last week I told you that we're on average, it doesn't quite go evenly over the years because of, again, the reval situation. Our average increase in the net grand list is about $16 million a year on average. And the way it actually works is about 2, 3, 4 million every year until reval comes in, and boom, it jumps way up and you get the 16 average. So it isn't 16 every year. Some years it's 3 or 4 or 2 or whatever. And if we don't get the big reval, which is people don't like because their taxes go up, then we won't get the big jump in that money coming in. So we got to look at that. The next is we definitely have to have an expedite. We got a great opportunity here. And with the development up on the hill, and it's a great opportunity to get way ahead over the next 10 years. It's a longer-term solution because we're not going to get any money from the development for the first 2 or 3 years here. But then it's going to start to go up and like a ski slope, and we're going to begin to get money, and we can get up to 5, 6, 7, 8 million, and I'm going to show you later how we do that. Okay, so that's what it. You want a better idea of that? Give me a call. The net grand list has grown by 3.52% because of the inflation in the reval situation in the last time around. And but what I want to point out here is every year, all the development we're doing now, like Wallens Hill and the factory we just agreed to sell the other day, a couple weeks ago, all in people's taxes going up and new businesses coming to town and all. That's where we get the $16 million from every year. So. I put in here increases in property values, like every year your taxes go up, so that, you know, that's because that increases that grand list. New businesses are added, new homes are added, etc. So the important point on this slide is that you got mine a little, as usual, out of whack here, so I have to look at this. Is that we go about 3.52%. Now that's inflation. Inflation is 350 or so on average, give or take. We got to get up to 6 or 7%, just like you do in your investments when you go to invest your money. You got to get up to 6 or 7%, so you have extra money to then fix things, do things, or get new buildings, and all the things you want to do. I'm going to have to speed up a little here. So what I want to say to you now is that we have, I showed you the steps to get, to try to get that 16 million up, or didn't I? I'm a little lost here. Well, no, I didn't. I somehow got a slide out of place. But anyway, the way you have to do that is you have to get a little bit up every year. So now you got 3.52% on average coming in every year, extra in the net grand list. You got to get up to 4.5. Then you got to get up to 5.5. Then you got to get up to 6.5. Then you got to, you know, somewhere around 6 or 7 is where you got to be eventually. Then you got to try to keep it there, okay? Now, the reason I'm giving you such a talk about this is because the grand leap may never come. Maybe we won't get the development in. Maybe they won't be able to sell the houses. This is unlikely, but, you know, you've got to plan for that. Now, somebody I was talking to today said, Brian, what if this bond issue falls? What are we going to do? How long is it going to take to get another bond issue out? If I were working on it and I was running it, which I'm not, and I appreciate the people who are doing it, and they're doing, they're doing their best. They're all doing the best. They think they're doing the best for the town. I don't have a problem with that. I would be working on the backup plan right now. So if it falls, boom, we know, and I would get a better representation on the team rather than just have people from one political party or one little factor. I'd have a balanced team. I'd have one Democrat, one Republican, one taxpayer guy, probably the controller of the town, one independent, and I try to get a small bond issue that would do that real critical stuff and have everybody see all the information and everybody be behind it, and that's called team building and all that, which we'll go into in future weeks. But for now, I want to say that we really got to concentrate on growing our net grand list, and we got to do it fast, or we're going to be in this pickle. We're still going to break even because there's no magic solution coming. Now, I want to talk about the long-term approach. The long-term approach, which I say here is more like the short-term. I got the short-term. I'm just going to go back a little because I found the slide. But basically, you can get a copy of this from me. I broke it down and say, here's how much money. If you increase it from 3.5 to 4.5, you're going to add 906,000. If you get it up to 5.0 with existing mill rate, you're going to add 1 million. That's $1 million. And if you get up to 5.5, you're going to get, that's $32 million. That is 16. It's almost double. You're going to get 1.108 extra in taxes, and et cetera. So you can get a copy of that from me if you're interested in it. And but that's the way it's got to happen. Now, how long is it going to take to do all that? I can tell you, it's going to take a long time because right now we don't have anything in the works. There are no new factories coming to town. The ones that are coming, anything that is coming, is in the 16 million area. All right, finish up Wallens Hill, get this there, get this there. That's all got to happen every year. So you got to keep getting that 16 million every year. So and then on top of it, you got to start to grow it. Right. All right. Now I'm going to talk about the two largest tax assessed values in town right now. The first one is Howmet. They make turbine. They're a turbine manufacturer. They own about $8 million in assessed value. Second is CL&P. They got about $6 million in assessed value. So right now, if you add those up, it's $14 million. When the first housing development, which has been approved by Inland Wetlands and approved by Planning and Zoning, is in the process of getting approved by both the Army Corps of Engineers and the DEP, and they're getting closer, they say, to the end. I don't know, you never can tell with this whole thing, but when they're approved and they go ahead and build the houses, we're going to get in 100, when they're done, this is 10 years away, we're going to get about 115,250,000 for that. Then the second will be Howmet. Now, Howmet in 10 years will go up for inflation. I'm just trying to make a point here that we're going to be going from 14 million to 123. Now, these are all estimates. It may never happen that way. There might be a big recession. There might be a big inflation. Who knows what these numbers will be? But this is just to give you a rough idea, orders of magnitude now. And anybody who tries to pick these apart, I mean, well, you're wasting your time because these are just rough guesses. And these are based upon the numbers, by the way, that they have put into the town. So they're not really just rough guesses. They're pretty well rough estimates. But anything can happen over the next 10 years. And there's also inflation on their properties. So we might be more than 115 there. All right. Now, when their second phase comes through, which they got through inland wetlands, they're going to get it through, hopefully, through Planning and Zoning. The first one that went to Planning and Zoning got denied for various reasons because it wasn't in line with the town's growth pattern plan. So now they're coming back in within weeks or months or whatever, and they're going to have a new plan. And I'll tell you a bit about that in a minute. But they're going to, when that gets in, then they're going to add another 61 million to the assessed value list, and it's going to go up to 176 million here, right? Now I did a slide so you could see that when that happens, we're going to get a big jump from our present 588 million net grand list over the next 10 years. Now, it's not tomorrow, to 764, and that's not counting any growth in the 16 million, right? So when you get it all, we're talking about a big 30% jump. Now, how does it affect taxes for us? Well, 20 million is what it is now. Remember I told you we had 20 million money we needed to divide into the divide by the net grand list, well, it'll be 26 million. And $6 million more. And that ain't hay. And by the way, according to the developers, people who did the study, it costs about $600, give or take, for for the town to maintain any individual. That's in reports they submitted, and they're in the public record in the town. Now you'll get a lot of reasons why we shouldn't bring this into town. There's a whole lot of people who don't want the development in town or may not want it, but everybody, including me, wants to see it done properly. We wouldn't want to see it if it wasn't done properly. So that's up to the land use boards. I got nothing to say about that. And they got all kinds of conditions on these developers. And then later they have to work with the developers or any of the businesses in town to make everybody a success, because it's a symbiotic relationship between all of us. Now, we can see we have the possibility now to become pretty prosperous. And we can all work towards that end. Every business will be better off. Every contractor will be better off, probably, if they're good. If they're not, they won't get the business. But they have to compete for that business. They don't get handed on a plate. The next thing is gas stations will be better off. People in the own stores will be better off. And the taxpayers will be better off, because they'll have a lot of people to share the tax burdens with and get the money in to be able to fix the schools in the town. Now, if you have any question on what we could do with the money, just read my green papers. City Hall put out about a year ago, after a year and a half of study of the town, and you'll see where we can use it. By the way, some of it is for the things we want to do in the bond issue. One of the things I pointed out a year and a half ago was, hey, if we can get this in and get that money, we could clean up all the schools and get new ones and everything. That's all in the bond, in that green paper package. So it's been around a long time. It's not a new issue. It's been around. We've all known it was there, and we were all out there trying to find it. And I will say there were a few people in town in various different parties and associations that were down there trying to help speed and expedite this thing, because they saw that it was going to be an environment for which we could be successful here. All right, now I'm going to just quickly talk about sinking funds. That's why I got Mr. Batchelor here as a guest tonight. And that's sinking funds are savings accounts. And in my green paper, and I don't really care if you make sinking funds. I think they're the best way to go, but you could put them in savings accounts if you want. But if you put it in a sinking fund, that first you have to go to the taxpayers and say, we want to put money in a sinking fund from all this money coming in from the development and elsewhere. We want to put it into a sinking fund for a new fire truck 5 years from now. And every year we want to put some money in there. You go to them and they approve it. They're not going to approve it if you're also asking for a 10 or 15% tax increase. They're not going to go for that. But if you can show them that they'll probably get a minimal tax increase, I say in my green papers, and you can get money into the sinking fund, they'll probably approve that, right? Now, once it's in the sinking fund, nobody can change it unless you go back to the referendum again. If they decide 3 years from now somebody gives them a fire truck and they don't need the money for the fire truck, they might want to keep it for the next fire truck, or the town might say, we're better off buying a snowplow with it. So they go to the referendum, they show the people, and we want to move it from this to that. Now, the reason Mr. Batchel is here is because in 1906, and if you look in the history book, Winsted and the town of Winchester, which I've read 10 times and given it out to people to read, says in here, that's how I found out he had a sinking fund here. He set up a sinking fund for the town, put in $25,000 in 1906, which was a lot of money in those days. And he said, this money is to be invested in the town at 2% interest, and when it gets to be $75,000, you can take 50 of it and spend it on the debt of the town, and leave the 25 to grow, and when it gets to 75 again, you can take 50 again. By the way, we still have that sinking fund. It's called the Winchester Sinking Fund. It's been around 100 years. It's in every, I guess they can't see me now. We got the slide up there. I'm trying to show them the book in the thing, so, okay, we're back to me. So here's the book. That's the Winsted book. You can all get it. I don't know if they got a library, but I'll lend you mine or get it out to the town hall. They got them. I gave them to them. Town of Winchester. I also think I gave some to the mayor as well. I gave them to the Board of Education. And I encourage them all to think like this. This is the audit report. You can see it in here, Winchester Sinking Fund. And I'm told there's roughly, I don't know, there's money in there, 60 or 70,000. There's more than 75,000 in there. So at the town's command, they can take some of that money, 50,000, and spend it on something reasonable for the town. Now, the town charter also says you can have sinking funds. And it says you have to go for a referendum to put the money in there. And you have to go to referendum to change it if you don't want to buy the fire truck or you don't want to buy a new police station. You could be saving one for a new police station or a new fire station. So that's the pitch I've been trying to get everybody. Now people say, oh, sinking funds don't work. There are a couple problems with sinking funds which I'll bring up. I still got another 15 minutes or so. The problems with sinking fund is if you don't put any money in, if you don't have any money, like now, we're breaking even, we take in $1, we spend $1, you can't put any money in the sinking fund. Now, when in my green papers I say to you out there who are family members and not business people, if you're saving money for your child's education, college education, or for their wedding, or for their down payment on their house, or whatever you want to save for, then you put it aside in a sinking fund. It's not officially a sinking fund, it's your savings account. And then you guard it with dogs and everything else to make sure nobody takes any of that money to go on a vacation or to buy a new flashy car or to do something like that, because then it isn't there anymore for the education. And if you have 3 children, you might want to do 3 of those. Some people can't afford to do any of those, right? So my concern here is that across the town, we should set up a whole bunch of sinking funds. When the money starts, we can set them up with $1. When the money starts coming in, we can put them into those sinking funds. Now, is that going to solve our immediate problem? No, it's not. That's why I say we got to reduce spending. We got to watch very carefully what we spend money on, so we don't make our problem worse. Because we're not going to be able to grow. If we grow the net grant list and we keep growing the budget at the same amount, just to cover inflationary things, then we're never going to get ahead. So I want to point out to everybody, you can read the charter. It's on page, I got to get my glasses. Let me put my glasses on for this. It's on page 16. In the history book, if you want to look, it's on page, I think it's 149. And here, there is no page number on this in here, so you just have to ask Henry Centrella to show it to you, and he'll show it to you. All right, so that's kind of that. Now, I wanted to talk. I still got a few minutes left. So now what I want to do is just talk about a few principles and a few concepts. And one of the things I want to say, and I'm going to open myself to criticism for this, but I'm going to do it anyway because I'm getting older now and I won't be around forever. But what I want to do is I just want to say I do have a sheet here that I can give you, anybody who writes in or sends me an email, about the positives of the development. And there's a lot of negatives too that come with anything. When you're in a business, you take risk. Risk is associated with your family, as risk is associated with your business. And the way you get around the risk is you get in and work together as a team. And because the development needs a good town too. I mean, they don't want to come into it with a big ritzy development into a town that has bad roads and bad, we don't have bad schools, but they wouldn't want to go in anywhere. That's the first question they ask, remember, is how are, I'm told, I don't talk to them, but and whenever I moved around, and remember 14 cities in 4 countries, some twice, I always went where the good schools were. And then I traveled the 2 hours to work or the 1 hour to work so the kids could go to good schools. And people will do that. So we really got to get that as a high priority, those test scores, and get some money in there. And I think that's very important. So if anybody wants this list, and if you can tell me more advantages or disadvantages, and these are all approximate because, they're for planning purposes, and we don't have any, we haven't sold any of the houses, so we don't know exactly what we're going to get for them. But it's going to be a nice golf course, and I was told today, first of all, let's deal with a couple of the real issues. Well, why don't you like the development? Oh, we don't like the development because they have a rule there which says you got to be 55 and older to live in these 450 houses. Well, they might change that rule. Well, they can't change the rule unless they get their own housing committee association to agree it. And then they have to come to the town of Winchester, P&Z, and they have to agree it. And maybe 20 years from now we'll say, yeah, they can have kids, and our schools will be able to handle it, be fine. And maybe they won't. So the other thing is they are giving land, 146 acres for conservation. They're having a golf course, top-notch golf course. I've been to all the meetings. I've listened to the golf course designers. And they're going to let anybody, it's going to be a public course. Anybody in Winchester can join and go there. They first started out saying it would only be 100 people, but they've changed that. They're preserving the historic sites. Robbers Cave will be preserved, and if there's other historic sites there, they're going to bend over backwards. They will be bonded. These are all the questions people ask me, so I try to answer those. If you want a copy of this, let me know, and I'll give it to you. The other thing I want to say, and I've only got 5 minutes, it's going to be quick, and this is what's going to cause controversy, but I'm going to do it anyway. When I was a young kid, I read a lot of Sherlock Holmes. I love Sherlock Holmes, and it was a great influence on my life because there was a fellow named Dr. Bell at the University of Edinburgh. That's who Sherlock Holmes was patterned after, and he was the science of observation. So I have learned running around the world, troubleshooting and building companies and helping people turn companies around and big computer systems around to observe. And wherever I go, people don't realize how much I can observe because I'm trained to do that. So I've put together, based upon the things I learned in a study in Scarlet and a few other writings by Conan Doyle, based upon the thought press of Dr. Bell at Edinburgh University, that's who Sherlock Holmes was patterned after, I learned how to do a lot of observation. So I wrote together a paper here called Early Warning Signs, mainly about the bond issue, okay? And they're the kind of things that when I come in, I don't even have to see the package that's about that big. I just have to look at the whole approach that was taken, and I've listed 17 issues here that concerned me about the whole thing. So if you want a copy of that, let me know and I'll give it to you. Next week, we're going to talk about how to organize for success, to be able to get this kind of work done, to be able to get grow the income in the town. And one more thing, because I only got a couple minutes, development is not my idea. I just came in, I looked around, I said, where can we get this Grand Leap from? There doesn't seem to be much else. So that came. If some other opportunity comes, like a big factory wants to come in and everybody in town wants to have it, and they want, I'm in favor of whatever. We just got to try to make it work all together, get together and pull on the oars and try to have it. And also, once we approve things in our committees, we don't want to. We can't be undermining it all the time. We got to get in and help make it all work. We got to help make the Tort Museum work. We got to help make the museum work. We got to help keep the university working. We got to help the restaurant people get more business and we all got to work together. It's got to be a positive attitude, all going in the same direction, all pulling on the oars, and nobody dragging their feet. I only got 2 minutes. I'm going to give you one example. When I went out on one place, and I can't give you the example. I'll give it to you next week. We don't have enough time for the example. Anyway, thanks for all the positive feedback. Anybody sees any errors or anything in numbers, give me a call, or rather send me a postcard or do me an email, and then we'll address it. Thank you very much. I appreciate it.